Welcome to Slim Nation's One-on-One podcast with conversations featuring the host, James Slim Overton.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Slim Nation One-on-One podcast. My name is James Slim Overton, and I'm here this morning with you. And thanks for joining us this morning here on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, which is called X now. But anyway, I'm here, and it's a pleasure for me to be here this morning with someone that has interviewed me a couple of times, and now I get a chance to sort of turn the tides on her. And she's a special guest, and I'll tell you how far she goes back with me. But her name is Pamela Nichols. Good morning, Pam. How you doing?
I'm wonderful, Slim. How are you?
I'm doing great, and thanks so much for agreeing to come on here. A long time coming, but let the people know how we met. In 2015, I received a heart transplant. But leading up to that, I was in and out of the hospital. I had an LVAD for about 3 years. So this young lady that was working for the Virginia Pilot, the current section, as a print writer for them, and I think she was covering. Well, the Currents was most of community-based at that time,
Yes.
community-based
hmm
section of the regular paper, and she covered human interest stories, things that was going on in the community. And she happened to come across me as I was awaiting for a heart, or that journey I was taking then. And she
hmm
did an article on me in that, and then came back later after I received my heart and did another interview along with another fella that
Yeah.
had heart issues. I don't believe he had a heart transplant, but he had heart issues
hmm
that he had overcome. He's a comedian. I can't remember his name, but
I can't remember his name either. I can see his
yeah,
face, and I can't remember his name.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because we met at Roger Brown's and had a sort of like it was an interview with the both of us,
hmm
sharing our experiences. But that's how we met, and we've been in contact off and on. We run into each other in the stores often, but and I've also followed her. But anyway, she is an author as well, and a mother. And during those times too, when she was running around on the news circuit beat, she had those children. Was children or children? Just one or
Children, more than one.
children?
hmm
Yeah, I remember. And you know, they say women are great multitaskers, and she was quite evident of that. I didn't know how she did it, but she did it. Sometimes the children were in tow, but most of the time she was, professional with everything she did, and I really appreciated the attention she gave me at a time when I was going through some things, and
hmm
so let's start out. But you're not originally from here, are you, Pam?
Yes, I am born and raised in
But
Brighton.
why did I think that you weren't? I don't know. What it was it Norfolk, Portsmouth,
No, right here in Portsmouth.
and
Born,
Portsmouth?
yeah, born and bred on Garfield Street in Brighton.
Wow, wow. And you told me that you probably know a lot of my wife's cousins that grew up in Brighton once I started name dropping.
Yeah,
But why I don't know why I thought that you were a transplant here. I use
no,
that word again.
no,
But
because that is. And because I was born and raised here, that was why writing for the pilot once I became an adult was so important to me because I grew up reading the Ledger Star and the Virginia
yeah,
Pilot. I remember when
yeah.
they had morning and
Morning and the evening, yeah. And it was kind of strange with that. They had the morning and the evening paper. Of course, a lot of times the story was the same, but sometime between that morning paper and the evening paper, a lot
mhm,
happened.
there you go.
you
Exactly.
know,
And I remember when the Sunday paper was this thick
yeah,
and it
yeah,
would take
yeah.
you all day to get to it through it.
Yeah,
And
all day to
we
get to it.
loved
Of
reading the
course,
newspaper.
I went straight to the funniest. You probably were reading the whole paper, and by me saying that, you growing up in Brighton, and what kind of were you always a writer or a person, a creative person? Did you keep a journal of what sort of inspired you to, eventually in adulthood to pursue a writing?
Well, let me tell you, it kind of worked in reverse. I had a lot of trauma growing up, and I did not realize until I became an adult that the writing was there. I had a memory, and this memory only came to me in the last 4 or 5 years, of my fourth grade teacher at James Hurst Elementary standing over me and saying, "You are a good writer." And
Hmm.
she was the meanest teacher in the school. Nobody wanted her. And she had not been kind to me or others that looked like me the entire year. And that was the nicest thing she ever said to me. The only nice thing she said to me. And I did not remember that. So no, I have memories of being a voracious reader when I was growing up. The writing became much later, and then I remembered it had always been there. Yeah.
So did you have, and growing up and growing up, since you had that skill and you had that imagination and all those memories, like you
Mhm.
said, that you had to write down, and with the kind of childhood you had, I guess it was quite therapeutic to be able to write and maybe take yourself into a different space sometime.
Right.
Because I always tell people, you can, if you take your time and sit down and read, you can go anywhere in the world,
Absolutely.
right in your living room.
Right. So the reading came first, and it would transport me, and I lived in my head with the way that I wanted things to be that differed from what was going on in my life. But yes, eventually it made its way onto the page, but initially it was the reading. Um, and a lot of great writers will tell you that they also voracious readers. So I see them going hand in hand.
Yeah. So along with that too, did you have, you were reading the newspaper. Probably
Mhm.
not many people your age were reading, especially you mentioned the Sunday thickness of
Mhm.
the Sunday newspaper and
Mhm.
going through that. Not, like I just said, I went straight to the funnies,
Right,
but
right.
and that was it, for that part of the paper. And on Saturdays, I'll get the green section.
The green sheet, I
Remember that?
forgot about that. Yes.
Just to know what was going to be on TV for the rest of the week.
Hmm.
But I mean, and your peers around you, were you joked or did they say, "Well, she's strange. She's always reading, and she reads the newspaper."
No, I didn't get much of that. They didn't. They
Mhm.
didn't know that I was reading at home, and it wasn't like I was. It wasn't weird to me, and at the same time, it wasn't anything that stood out. I just remember that, when I recall that that's what I was doing. So no, I wasn't made fun of for that. I had plenty of other things that people made fun of me about, but not the reading.
So when you got to elevate your education, did you stay on that path in journalism? Because I remember when I went in college, one of our professors told us some of the college students weren't reading the paper. He couldn't believe that. He said, "Y'all in college and y'all not reading the paper every day." And the class he had was kind of based on talking about current events.
Right.
And he was trying to educate us on what was happening then in the 70s. So, a
Hmm.
lot was going on there with Nixon and everything.
Right.
And
Right.
some people didn't read the paper, and he come in there. We had the text, but we had the text, and he taught out of that. But, the first thing he did was talk about what was going on currently in the world, in the country and the world.
Yes.
So I said that to say that you take that zeal that you had for reading
Mhm.
and writing, did you further that through your education in journalism or something like that?
I did. I always followed the news, and even when you mentioned my children, I was homeschooling my children at the time when I
Mm.
was writing for the pilot. So um, even as middle schoolers, I was teaching them current events. They had a CNN had a youth version of their news channel, and my girls could tell you what was going on in the news from an age appropriate stance. So that has followed me from the time that I was younger up until now. Still a news junkie.
Wow, wow. So you went. you went to college, and did you say you studied journalism? And
No, I
what?
didn't. I studied human services counseling in college.
Okay,
Journalism came only because I was reading the newspaper one day and they were starting an offshoot of the Currents. And it was going to cover, right there's a section where Suffolk, Portsmouth, and Chesapeake meets, and they call it Your Corner. They were
yeah.
starting a new current supplement, and they wanted writers. So that is what got me into there. So I didn't study journalism in college. I studied human services counseling in college, and I was working when I was working before I stopped to stay home with my kids. I worked at Chesapeake Social Services and Newport News Social Services.
So how was that? I mean, they were looking for writers, and I'm sure it was other people applying for those jobs that
Mhm.
had that background in journalism. So, and you didn't have that in your resume. What was it you did to impress them to make them say, okay, well, you can be a part of this?
Okay, so there was a family newspaper in Chesapeake. I don't know if it's still there, called The Shopper, and I had written for them for a
Okay,
while. So I
so you
sent
had,
Right. So I did have some clips.
mhm,
Also, I freelanced with the Virginian Pilot when they had a book review page. There was about 3 or 4 years before they hired me for this supplement right here, and so I was writing book reviews, and that is something that I still do. I love to
mhm,
break a book down, and I had done that for about 2 or 3 years. So I sent in and I let them know that I was born and raised in Portsmouth. There is an angle to Portsmouth news and history that you have to hit just right. And
right,
at the time, Portsmouth was always presented a certain way in the Virginian
yeah.
Pilot. So when I approached them, I let them know that I know the history of this city. I was born and raised here. Here's some things you probably don't know about Portsmouth. And then I hit them with the writing samples, and that got me in.
So then you move on to the newspaper, the local newspaper.
Yeah.
And of course, you got the opportunity to write, like you said, about the
Mhm.
city that you
Mhm.
knew, because you're correct. And sometimes it's still true today that we got the short end of the stick. The most of the stories we read were negative,
Mhm.
or and we just had a lot more going on
Yes.
historically
Yes.
in our city that was needed to be tapped, and you had that opportunity to do that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so when you were with the Current, how did you? I know all the papers had editors. That you had to get
Mhm.
past the editors. How
Mhm.
much freedom did you have at the Current into picking your stories and following through with them?
I
Uh, uh,
had, Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I had 100% freedom. Now because I was a freelancer, I was assigned an editor, and I
Okay.
had to run my stories by him. So what I would do is I would sit down at the beginning of the month or the end of one month and say, listen, here are 5 or 6 stories that I would like to develop. There's this guy named Slim, and he's got quite a following, and he's having a heart transplant. I would love to cover that story. And then
Mm.
I would say also, because Slim, there was another story I interviewed you on, and that was because I love history so much. And it
Oh
involved,
yeah.
remember, it involved your
The,
father.
the, yeah, and the Capitol Theater. Yeah, I remember that.
I
Forgot
wrote,
about that. So
yes,
about
because
3 times. Yeah.
exactly. So if you look at the breadth of my stories, most of them dealt with Portsmouth history because we have such a rich history that everyone seemed to willingly overlook. So I did a story on the black movie theaters in Portsmouth, the lyric,
Hmm.
and then your father came up in there. And so
Yeah.
again, back to your question. So I would submit to my editor the stories that I would like to see, that I would like to, and he would say, yes, go ahead and do it. And then every now and again, he would actually assign me a story. But 9 times out of 10, the stories that I wrote were stories that I hunted down and got approval to write.
Was that Marvin Lake at the time? Was he there when you were there?
No, Marvin Lake was not mine. Mine was Ron Crow, and he was my editor the entire time I was there.
Oh, okay. I know. Hold on just now. I know he had a history there, and I got to know him.
Sign me a story, but 9 times out of 10, the stories that
Marvin Lake at the time, was he there when you were there?
no, Marvin Lake.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. The beauty of
Techno,
technology.
tech, technology. But yeah, and I got to know Marvin quite well. But yeah, so pretty much, because I heard stories from other reporters in certain situations where they they tried to get a story. They had a story they really believed in and couldn't
Mhm,
get it past the editors.
mhm.
They didn't think it was an important enough story or wasn't, uh, the term, if it bleeds, it
If it
leads.
bleeds, it leads. Right. Exactly. And
But
I did not have that. I had a very good the relationship between a reporter, journalist, and their editor can make or break. And I had a good relationship with Ron. I believe he trusted that I knew what was going on in Portsmouth. He was a transplant. I believe he was from somewhere up north. It might have been Philadelphia. I'm not sure. So he didn't
mhm,
quite understand some things. I'll give you a really good point in question. Um, because it's coming up in next month, as a matter of fact. Craddock always has a come home to Craddock every year.
mhm,
And I would go out there and I would run it and take pictures. And at one point, I think it was like the first or second or third time, um, he said something like, how come when you do these stories there are no black people in it, when I talk to the organizers or all that. And I had to let him know that when Craddock was, it was segregated down here. That
right.
blew his mind. He did not understand that. And I would say that's why in some of my stories, and I'm using Craddock only because it came up in that particular story. That's why when some of my stories come through, it might have that slant, or you might only see this and not see this. That is the
Mhm.
reason. We're getting better at this. We're coming together, but back in the day, this is how it was around here, and that blew
Yeah,
his mind.
yeah, and probably it was very interesting once he knew the history of Craddock and Truxton. They
I
were formed. Go ahead. They were formed for the same reason, one a year apart,
mm-hmm,
and the difference in the communities. Even though Truxton was a vibrant community, but you could see the difference in the makeup of the communities. But anyway, they were formed, and that was just the times. But
mm-hmm,
I guess, like you said, he was blown away by that. A lot of
yes,
people, didn't grow up in that kind of environment.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So it's kind of so that probably made it interesting.
yes,
So so I guess a natural progression for you, at some point was to be an author, for you to write books, and you have four so far, and looks like the fourth one maybe last week
yes,
just came out, just was introduced, and
mm-hmm,
I saw on the Facebook you had a thing where a picture of you reading your book to some people the
yes,
day before it was coming out,
mm-hmm,
or
mm-hmm,
reading excerpts from it.
yes,
So it looks like all four of them are sort of Christian based, and I saw something that sort of tickled me, because when I was in the hospital, when you have all that time, somehow you get real creative. So I was doing a lot of writing. I was chronologizing my every day in the hospital. It
mm-hmm,
was therapeutic for me, and I was
mm-hmm,
hoping it would help somebody. Some of the stories were kind of humorous. I think you followed one of the things where I was running one of my dogs for mayor,
right, right,
but it was a lot of crazy things coming out. There was a lot of things that was I was giving from the heart as well. And I used to use this little play on words. I say all my stories are true fiction, which is true
right.
fiction, like true lies, or whatever, however you want to. And I noticed you kind of use that truthful Christian fiction.
Fiction. Mm-hmm.
Talk about that, using that to describe, because what you have is a series of
Yes,
books, so all of them are sort of related as far as the stories.
yes, sir. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So so what? Talk about that truthful Christian fiction, how you came about that, and the meaning, the true meaning behind that.
Okay, okay. Well, let me tell you about the series first. It's called the Inside
Okay.
Out. It's called the Inside Out series. It's a series of 5 books, but I
Five.
released.
Okay.
I haven't start. I started the fifth, and it'll be released. I'm thinking February or March. But number 4 released last Saturday, which was my birthday. That was my birthday gift to myself.
Well,
And
yeah. Happy belated birthday.
thank you. And what
Yeah.
it is just we have is Christian based, and there is a theme to every book, but then there's an overall theme. The overall theme is you have everything you ever need. That's the way God created us. However, um, society and pain and issues kind of tamp that down. So then from there, each book has a particular theme. The first book is about eating disorders. The second book is about suicide and depression. The third book is about domestic violence and spiritual abuse within churches. And the fourth book, the one that just released, is about relationship trauma, both um, marital and platonic. Because the answer is the same. And these are things that we all kind of go through and deal with, but our pain makes us not see what is going on. And so I call it truthful Christian fiction because it's fiction, but I'm telling you the truth about what you're going through from a biblical base. Because the backdrop of each of those books, like you read 2 or 3 chapters, and then in that fourth chapter, you see the demons have to have meetings and decide what they're going to do in this person's life. And then there's an angel assigned who halts that plan every single time. And what I'm trying to do is get people aware of, one, some of the negative messages that we believe that are hindering ourselves, and 2, to be aware of the spiritual that is working all around us. Some of these things that you're doing, it's not really you. That's some kind of learned behavior that came down through your bloodline, some generational thing that you're acting out in your life, but you have the power to come against that. And because a lot of times we of faith place so much emphasis on what the enemy is doing, what the devil is doing, and we don't understand, and we're not seeing the power and the open doors that God has granted us. We would never say it out loud, but I really believe some of us give more weight and bearing to what Satan is doing than what the power that we have on the inside of us. Some of us would never admit that, because in my life it was true. I mean, he was running me crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I'm calling it truthful Christian fiction.
Okay. Yeah. And I get that, because that's why I used to say true, whatever I'm writing is true fiction. I said, and I would say, you believe what you want, because a lot of it was based on my truth, and a lot of it fiction thrown in there to, I guess, make it readable sometimes. But now, would you suggest are these? It's a series, but do they stand alone? Would you suggest starting at book 1 and going to book 5, or could you just pick up book 5 and then later read book 1? How does that work?
You don't have to read them in order. Some series you have to start at 1 and then 1 goes into 2. Mine are not like that. I call it a series because they all come under that umbrella that, we have it within, and you need to pay attention to what's going on around you. However, because they're themed, the way mine are a series is that one person from book 1 is in book 2, and then a person from book 1 shows up again in book 3 and 4. So you will recognize some of the people, and it's the same angels and the same demons through all 4, but the topics are different. So you can just pick up whichever.
Yeah, because I guess the demons and the angels, they are eternal. So, so they're going to be the same throughout your life. Just like you said, especially if they are assigned to you, and and they have their, they have what they have to do in order. So, go ahead.
I got excited. I'm sorry. One of my angels is called Araminta, because Araminta Ross is Harriet Tubman's real name. And I have this love affair, a fiction affinity for Harriet Tubman. I went to the Harriet Tubman Museum summer before last and have just never been the same. My coworkers know there's a Harriet Tubman picture right on my desk. And if I'm having a bad day, I'll say, listen, let me go in here and talk to Harriet for a few minutes. So one of my angels in the series is named Araminta, and I name her in honor of Harriet Tubman.
Yeah, it's always good it's also good to include a little bit of history like that, for people to, because, it was well into my adulthood when I learned more about Harriet Tubman. Everybody just knew her as, the Underground Railroad lady, but some of the other things she did after that, served in the military, and she lived to a ripe old age.
Yes.
because people, it's just like she was the underground lady and just cut
And
off
that's
there.
it.
Nobody really know what happened after that. Did she ever get caught?
Mhm,
Because the story just wasn't completely told up until recently. Now,
mhm, mhm.
we getting all of it. So, and I can understand your fascination for her.
Yes.
Once you know more about her, because I
Sure.
felt the same way. I said, oh, this lady's even more amazing than I thought.
Mhm, mhm.
So being able to throw those little bit of historical things in there that make people wonder. Do you spell out, or do you say in one of the forward of your book that's letting people know that was Harriet Tubman's name? Or
No, it's actually right in the story. When
oh,
she
okay.
comes on the scene, there's a particular situation where she comes on the scene, and the way I write that sentence, I let it know this angel is named um, Araminta, which is the given name of Harriet Tubman, who was also a liberator. Because this angel is, when she shows up, it's about to go down. She's about to cut something off. She's a liberator, and that's what Harriet Tubman was. And so I marry those in there. And because I love history so much, that's not the only time that shows up. One of my characters, I think it's book three. It is book three. There is an African
Always,
American.
never.
Always never. There
Mhm.
is an African American. Actually, I'm sorry. Book two, More Grace.
Okay. Okay.
Get my brain right. It is More Grace. There is a husband and wife in there that I pattern after Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee. That is who I'm thinking of because this character grew up in the Nation of Islam. Actually, his parents came through because I do my research. That's what the Virginian pilot taught me.
Hmm.
His parents came through Marcus Garvey, and after Marcus Garvey was deported, they took on Nation of Islam. So they about have a fit when their daughter becomes a Christian because that goes against what they believe and how they've raised her. Christianity is a white man's religion, so they don't understand that. So we spend some time going over there, and I even mentioned in there how her father, this gentleman, do you remember the old Good Times show when he brought in the picture of Black Jesus and Florida about had a fit?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mentioned that in there because that is his thinking. So there is a change. There's an eventual shift in his thinking towards the end of the book, and something painful sets off that shift. But yeah, so I like history, and some of my books are going to have all that in there.
And that's important. I'm glad you mentioned that because a lot of people might think a fiction writer, everything is just going to come from creatively from their head and their imagination. But even to be a good fiction writer, you still have to do your research because even though it might be fiction, things have to make sense, historically, and so or people will call you out for it. So
Yes, they
that's
will.
important for the young writers to know.
Right. When I was writing for the Virginian Pilot, and when I started getting the idea to start my fiction, I had the notion that it's gonna be it's gonna be light, it's gonna be easy, it's fiction. It's not gonna be like the Virginia Pilot where I have to interview people and research and make sure what they say is correct. So I'm not
Hmm.
printing something that's not correct. Fiction is a lot of work because it has to be believable. You can make up a world, but your readers have to be able to connect, or it's not gonna land. It's not gonna land
Right.
at all. I
Yeah.
have to, yeah.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say there's another true life. There's several in every book. Something true happens in there, and in the book that released last week, book four, Hidden Mercy, where we're talking about the trauma of relationships, the mass shooting in Virginia Beach shows up in there.
Mm.
Okay, my version of it, because this gentleman's wife is killed in a mass shooting, and then he finds out something about her life that he did not know, and it just guts him. And in the second part of that book, there was a young man, I believe it was in Arizona. He was a very gentle young man, so much so that he used to play violin for cats, if you know which story I'm talking about.
Mm.
And he was killed by law enforcement. And that's another one of those stories that it just seemed one after another. And so I patterned one of my characters in the book that released last week after that. This is a young man. He has an intellectual disability, and he is he's harmed by someone merely because of the color of his skin. And so I wrote that through. And it's Christian fiction again, but it's truthful.
Yes.
Hmm.
And well, no telling how long this series will go on because with you including, different stories of our history, and of
Hmm.
course, history is being made every day. And I'm sure as you continue with your series of books, you'll be adding little pieces of what's going on today. And in saying that, being a journalist and an author, a writer of or freelance. How do you look at the way journalism is today? The newspaper is not as, I don't even get the newspaper anymore, but it's not, I get it online. But, it's just so many places that people go to get what they think is factual news. And it's just usually editorial. I don't even want to use editorials because
Hmm.
editorials
Are
that's more
supposed to be down the middle,
professional,
right? Hmm.
right? That's more of a professional thing. Well, and based in fact. If you see all editorial, those people that write those have done their research and work. But
Hmm.
we have all these people out here now that spreading information, any way they want to, and people are taking it as the truth, and a
Hmm.
lot of it is misinformation, or they're just trying to spread their agenda. So, what do you think about that? Because this is an era that a lot of our young people are coming up. You know, used to you could read the paper, and if they were wrong, the retraction would be in the next edition. But
Exactly.
if someone's wrong now, you can't find that retraction if they write one.
Right.
So, so what do you think about, where we're going now with the journalism and how it's being portrayed or shared with the public? And, you know, that's why
Yeah.
you see people are so misinformed or
Right.
misguided.
Now more than ever, you have to do the work to get the correct news. I Let me start by saying never would I have ever thought that the mighty Virginian pilot would have been sold the way that it was.
Mhm.
Never would I have thought. And then they closed it down because they were in that building on Brambleton for like 80
Yeah,
years.
yeah,
And now I don't know how you can write community news when you're on the other side of the water. Um, Never would I have thought that would have happened.
mm,
And then second to that, a lot of the, I think because of the proliferation of social media, um, a lot of the news is like the gotcha news.
yeah,
They pull out one part and enlarge that, or the title is just clickbait to get you in to read the story. A case in point is this young lady over the last weekend. I can't even think of her name. Black young lady. She was playing tennis. She's a tennis star, and the ref 6 times in a row allowed something. That should not have been allowed. And she walked over to her and said, "This is wrong. This is what you should be doing." And she was very respectful. And the audience knew. And then the broadcasters, because it was broadcast live, and they were saying, "Yes, she's right. She's right." This young lady stood up for herself and said to the umpire, "This is not what you're supposed to do." And then she went on, played the game, and won the game.
hmm
The clickbait, when it hit social media, said that she called her out, that she blasted her, and that was not true.
not what happened. And
That
people
they
took that
want
and
you
ran with it.
exactly. They
And
want you to exactly, and
and-
I call that cheating
yeah,
because if you are a strong enough writer, you can write the truth and you can write a headline and you can write a story that will pull people in because you want people to be drawn to you for the truth. Because if they're drawn to you for the clickbait, you haven't really won because other people are doing clickbait as well.
yeah,
See?
yeah. And it's
So
amazing. And doesn't sound like she did a John McEnroe thing, but
he did
you,
not.
if you remember how his outburst.
honey,
You
he
know,
was something. It's
and
it's amazing when you get to our age and you listen to John now. He's mellowed. Well, we remember John used to throw a fit and
yeah,
literally do rackets.
yeah, and it was crazy, and it was just people said, well, that's John McEnroe, and when Sabrina did it, it was awful, the worst thing in the world. And even I don't. I guess they do what they have to do. The competition out there. You might see an article that has a picture of Michelle Obama. You go to read the story, and there's nothing about
Nothing about it right there.
nothing about her. Or the picture might be there, and they might say, "Guess who died today?" And they got her picture. You say, "Oh my
Right,
goodness." But
right.
now I don't get sucked in by that because you'll see things and somebody comment. You see what just happened? If I don't see it in a lot of different sources, until I see it in a lot of different credible sources, I'm
Mhm.
not going to go for it. And that's what people should do. If you have see a story or something, or if you really want to know what's going on, you check out a few different sources before you, especially if you're a person that wants to go out and talk about it.
Exactly, exactly. And
You
see,
know,
I kind of feel for this generation of people growing up. They didn't grow up in the era of Harry Reasoner and Eric Sevareid and Tom Brokaw
Walter
and
Cronkite,
Walter
yeah,
Cronkite. They didn't grow up with that. This is
got
what they're growing up with. So we
Tucker
have something,
Carlson.
exactly, we have something to compare it to. So like you
Mhm.
said, if something comes across and it's like, oh, Oprah died, I'm like, wait a minute. If Oprah died, I would have been seeing it someplace else.
Yeah, yeah.
And they automatically click on it because this is news to them.
And then you get down in the store and it says Oprah's friend died. Somebody we have no idea who it is, but
Exactly.
they get you to. And I think especially on the social media scene, I think if they thrive on the clicks that they get. So
Mhm.
even if you're there for a hot second, as long as you clicked on, they get
It
credit for that
counts.
somehow.
Right.
Yeah, it counts.
Exactly. Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Amazing. So I hope more people will be aware, or just take the time and look at the people for what they are. Some of these stories, and for us being around like those people you mentioned, and if you sit down and watch some of these shows and actually see them telling lies,
Yeah.
and they got millions of viewers
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
every day, and they're sitting up actually telling a lie to millions of people, and the people believe it.
Yeah. Yeah. But you and I didn't even have to go, and some of us in Portsmouth don't even have to go nationally because there was a season, I think it was like 2 or 3 years. It seemed like we had a particular reporter that always, always, always found the negative, remember?
Yeah, yeah,
And yeah, it really got that way.
yeah,
It
yeah.
was like
I
one
remember.
one sentence and just
Yeah, and he would tear it up. And he, and if he, if we talking about the same person, I know he would cover some city council meetings, and I was going on a regular basis. And sometimes he would come in and get booed, and it's like he thrived off that. You know, people coming at him. So the more you came at him, the more he wrote.
yes,
Because he figured he was scoring brownie points if he got your attention. You
exactly.
know, and in his mind, that was a good thing for
Right,
people to not like him. So okay, I must be doing something right.
right.
But
And that's a
what?
picture just of what you were just explaining. They just need the attention.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So look, I appreciate you coming on, and I hope to have you back again. To talk about other things that's going on. Talk about your books, of course. And I'm glad I had the opportunity to talk to you, to interview you after all these times. And you
Yeah.
reminded me it was 3 times that we had an interview that you talked to me, and I'll never forget. That story you covered, you did when I was in the hospital waiting for that heart, and it was a part of me coping what was going on. That had a
Mhm,
lot to do with it, and I always had the attitude, not why me, but because this could have happened to anybody. I just
mhm.
while I was there, I tried to make the best out of the situation, regardless of what might have happened. Me telling that story, and you know what's amazing? how creative I was. I mean, I would just wake up and things would come to me. And I'm not saying it was professional or anything, but
Mhm.
I would put it on Facebook, and a lot of people, and I met a lot of people through that. And as soon as I got the hard and got well, that creativity just
Right up. You
just
got
went
it. You
there.
had it when you needed it.
You
One of the
talk about,
things that, yeah, one of the things that drew me to that story is that you were in the hospital for a while before I even realized that you were in the hospital. That's
yeah,
how positive you were. And then I
yeah,
said, I think, are you in the hospital? And you were
yeah,
like, yep. So that, and so you were very positive. That I knew that would make a good story. You had a lot of support. I remember the Civic League
yeah.
um, got together and did something for you, and
Oh
those
yeah,
stories that I love. See, those were the stories that I loved about Portsmouth. It is her people and the way we came together. I think it was called "Have a Heart for James" or
Ever
something like
Harper James. A lot of people put that on their Facebook.
that.
My
Yes.
wife made a request, for
Mhm.
people to put that hard up there until I received the hard, and many people did that and kept it up there for 3 years until
Yes.
I received the hard, and
Hmm.
that was amazing to me. So that's why it let me know how many people you can reach. You know, with positive stories like that. It doesn't always have to be the negative thing or the got you, like you said earlier,
Hmm.
stories. You know, you just want to spread something different, like you're doing with your books. With the Christian. I had another author up here that has a Christian fiction book out there, and he said pretty much the same thing. A
Oh,
lot of it is him, but told through like truthful fiction. So,
right, right, right.
in order to get people to read it. But the message is in there. I wanted to mention one more thing. I saw on there where you you did some poetry, uh,
Yes.
and what in a certain you mentioned. I can't get to it now, but you mentioned a certain lady that inspired you, and you came home and sat down and said, "Let me try this." And I read the poem, and it was deep. You had a message in there about
Well,
the
thank
flow,
you.
flowing rivers. Was that
Flowing
the name?
waters. Yes.
Flowing waters, and I saw how you sort of mixed in the
Hmm.
flowing waters with how life can be, the ripples in there, and how calm waters could be a sign of complacency. Complacency,
Exactly. I got kind
and
of deep on that.
yeah,
Let
yeah.
me
I
tell
said,
you what
"Well, this is a little deep."
let me tell you what happened. I also have a podcast because books have been so healing. Like I've mentioned before, I've had a lot of trauma in my life, but books and writing has really been healing for me. So I have
Hmm.
a podcast where I interview people whose lived experiences and their books show that they are healed and heal other people. And one of those people was Courtney. And I actually met her because I was looking for something to do. And she had a book signing one day and I went to
Hmm.
it. And she's a poet and her writing is just beautiful. And whenever I heard poetry, I always thought poems, which is too hard for me. But she let me know, no, 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 this is what poetry is. It is the emotion of writing. So I went to a class and I sat in on the class and she gave a prompt. She no teaching or anything. She says, okay, here is your title, a puddle of water or something like a ripple of water. And then she set the timer and I just wrote what came up. And that is what came up. Because at this point in my life, I'm learning how to move and flow and everything that leaves you isn't bad and some of the things that you attract are good. And so that's what came up in there. And I was like, oh my gosh, because I also help new writers. I also edit and train new writers,
Hmm.
this is just adding another layer to it. And I'm so grateful for having met her. And now she's gone on and she's the poet laureate of the area that she's from. And I have her book right over there. And it really is remarkable. So that's what that was. You can get to where you feel God has called you, but you can always learn more. You can always keep going forward.
Yeah,
Like you are retired and still have this wonderful, wonderful platform. So that is the story behind that. If you'd asked me a month ago would I have ever been able to write poetry, I would have said no. I don't do poetry. But now I understand what poetry is and I'm leaning more into it and I can feel it changing my writing. I can feel
yeah,
it changing my writing. Hmm.
yeah. And I said, "Oh, let me read this," and used to read a lot of poetry, and it took a while to try to understand I don't understand this, and most people think all poetry has to rhyme or it's not
I
poetry,
thought.
but if you really get into it, you can see how, and you can. It's usually poetry is really, and writing books, novels too, and fiction, and biographies. But poetry, you can feel it coming from that person's heart. I mean, they'll take something and put it put the words together beautifully,
Hmm.
but it has a real uh, a meaning that really can capture you if you really look at it and inspire you. Because I read that and I said some things you never thought about. I never. Everybody have seen the
A
ripples in
ripple
the
of
water
water.
and everything
Right.
like that, but you never put it together, or when the water is calm,
Hmm.
what that means or what that can mean, and how you can associate that with your life. And it's just
Yes.
sitting down and reading things like that sometimes can relax your mind, and
Hmm.
something that we have gotten away from that we need to do every once in a while. If you want to survive in this crazy world, you have to take out time, and if it's early in the morning or late at night or whatever it is, and
Hmm.
just read, because your mind is always seeking knowledge.
Always, always. And I hope that that also is a lighthouse or a message to someone who might feel like they want to write something, but they don't think that they can. I want to challenge you that it is in there. It is major for me to have sat down and all she did was say, this is the title. And she gave us, like, I think, like 3 or 4 minutes. And that is what came up. No training, no prompting. And I'm not saying it's the best in the world, but I did not know it was in there. It was in fact in there. So I want to challenge anyone who thinks that they might want to write a book. They have an idea or a feeling, I might want to write a book, but I can't do that. I ain't got time. I don't know how to do that. Just the fact that you want to do it, to me, is a large indicator that you are called to do this and you can do this and something in you wants to come up. That I know.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to get with you because I've been writing a book for 20 years, and I think I have a few books I can write about
You honestly,
adoption,
you do.
being adopted and not finding out till I was 21, and of course the heart issue. So
Mhm.
I'm glad we kind of reconnected, so I can talk
Yeah.
to you about that and see how I can go about putting that together. But
Yeah.
anyway, before we go off, tell people how they can watch your podcast or when your
Mhm.
podcast is on, and then tell us how we can get your books.
Okay, so my podcast is called the Healing Words Podcast. You can find it at Callcast, CALLCAST.co, and then Healing Words. You can come on my Facebook page, Pamela Writes,
Hmm.
PAMELAWRITES, and I'll have the link up there. My
Hmm.
books are on Amazon under Pamela Nichols, and my website is pamelawrites.org. Also, if you're here in Portsmouth, you can come out today, actually, at First Fridays, down where we have the farmers market on High Street. From
Hmm.
5 until about 8 or 9, we have First Fridays, and that's where we have local writers and artists and artisans out there, and you can get my books then, and my writer friends, you can check out their books as well. And the museum is open, and there's a free concert, and it's held every first Friday. It is wonderful. So come on down and interact. Come on down and chat with me. Let's finish the conversation we have here. I got a lot of Portsmouth stories I can tell you.
Okay, okay, yeah. And my wife likes to come down to the first Friday, so
It's
hopefully, if
wonderful.
nothing's going on, we'll come down there. Now,
Okay.
let people know near the end you kind of froze a few times,
Okay.
but your voice was still coming out. So
Okay.
sometimes the internet or the Wi-Fi connection will gets weak or something like that. But
Okay.
near the end, you did freeze a few times, and but your voice was still, which is important. Your voice got the word out. So thanks
Okay.
again. We appreciate you, and we look forward to seeing you again. And we'll talk about writing.
Yes, we will.
We'll see what I can do. Maybe I can put something together that I've been thinking about for years,
There you go.
and we'll try to see you later on. But thanks again, and I want to say To everybody watching, thanks for watching the Slim Nation 101's podcast, and continue to watch as we bring local authors. Seem like that's what I've been doing a lot of lately, but I'm always bring in local and authors and authors from other areas too, and talk about other things with this one-on-one, so you get to know the people that are doing these amazing things out here. Thanks a lot, and we appreciate you. We'll see you next time. As always, be aware, be informed, and most of all, be involved. And remember, your voice is your vote, or your vote is your voice. So make sure you get out there and exercise that right. Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.